Welcome to Daybreak, the podcast. Let me begin today with a few lines, ancient, stark, but unsettling. Whoever blasphemes the name of the Lord shall surely be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him. Leviticus chapter 24, verse 16. If there is a betrothed virgin, and a man meets her in the city and lies with her, he shall bring them both out to the gate of that city, and you shall stone them to death with stones. Deuteronomy chapter 22, verses 23 and 24. And the Lord said to Moses, the man shall be put to death. All the congregation shall stone him with stones outside the camp. Genesis chapter 15, 32 to 36 verses. These are not obscure lines. They are not marginal footnotes. They are central, scriptural, and foundational. And yet today, I'm not here to talk about Torah. I'm here to talk about Islamic Shariah law and the Western obsession with it. So stay with me as I'll be right back. Welcome back to Daybreak, the podcast. I shall start by clearing the ground because the conversation around Sharia is often built on confusion. And let me start by saying that Sharia law and butter chicken are both terms coined by the West itself, and they both serve exclusively at Western pleasures or displeasures. You see, in the modern world, the word law has a very specific meaning. It refers to a system of rules created and enforced by a governing authority. Rules that regulate behavior, often independent of morality. But Sharia is not law in that narrow sense. The word Sharia comes from the Quran, appearing in chapter 45, verse 18. Now we have set you, O Prophet, on a clear path. A path. Not a penal code, not a statute book, a path. In its classical understanding, Sharia is the totality of divine guidance. It includes worship, ethics, personal conduct, family life, social justice, and yes, some legal principles. But at its core, it is moral before it is legal. And yet today, when people say Sharia, what do they mean? Punishments, hudud, stoning, amputations. Sharia is reduced to a handful of penalties, stripped of its moral, spiritual, and intellectual dimension and repackaged into a phrase that did not even exist historically, Sharia law. A term largely shaped in the colonial and modern Western vocabulary. Okay, let's go back in time, back to the 7th century. Arabia at that time was not a centralized state. It was a tribal society. Law was not codified. Authority was fragmented. Justice, when it existed, was often harsh and immediate. And in that environment, corporal punishment was not unusual. But here is the part that is often ignored, that the most structured and developed legal system in that region before Islam was not Arabian. It was biblical. The Hebrew Bible, that Christians call the Old Testament, already contained a detailed system of law, including stoning, for a range of offenses, including adultery, blasphemy, idol worshipping, Sabbath violation, rebellion, and yes, sorcery. And not just laws, but narratives as well. A man gathering sticks on the Sabbath, stoned. Achan, for disobedience, stoned. Naboth, falsely accused, stoned. Zachariah, in the temple court, stoned. These are not Islamic stories. They predate Islam by over a millennium. So let's be precise. Stoning is not an Islamic invention. It is a much older Near Eastern and especially biblical punishment, dating back roughly between 1000 to 500 BC, if not earlier. And let me further surprise you by telling you that stoning is not ordained in Quran. Now, fast forward again to Medina between the year 622 and 632. And this is where the Quran begins to address legal matters more explicitly. But Medina is not a vacuum, it is a plural society. It includes Jewish tribes deeply rooted in their own legal traditions. Places like Khyber, Fadak, Taima, they were not peripheral societies or communities, they were integral to the social and economic fabric of the region. So the Quran emerges into a world already shaped by Jewish law, Christian ethics, and Arab tribal customs. And the Quran acknowledges this reality. In chapter 5, we find something remarkable. If you judge between them, judge with justice. But why do they come to you for judgment when they have the Torah? Indeed, we revealed the Torah by which the prophets judged the Jews. That's again chapter 5, verses 42 to 44. This is not ambiguity, this is clarity. Quran ordains that each community is to be judged by its own revelation. The prophet is not told to erase Torah, he is told to recognize it, which leads to a simple but often overlooked principle. Even if one speaks of Shariah law, it is not universal in application. It is internal, meant for the community that believes in it. Now here is where things begin to go wrong in modern discussions. We read ancient texts with modern expectations. We isolate verses, we strip them of context, we apply 21st century moral frameworks to 7th century or even older societies. This is called presentism, and it distorts more than it reveals. Because pre-modern societies, Jewish, Christian, and Muslims, did not read their scriptures as flat, literal codes to be mechanically applied. They debated, they interpreted, and they restricted. In Jewish tradition, the Talmud introduced such strict evidentiary standard that capital punishment became almost impossible to carry out. Some rabbis even said, a court that executes once in 70 years is destructive. That's not a system eager to stone people. It's a system trying to avoid it. And yet in the modern era, something changes across religions, not just Islam. We see the rise of fundamentalism, a tendency to read scriptures literally, rigidly, and politically, and especially in Muslim world. Some modern Islamist movements begin to treat scriptures as a fixed legal code, applying punishments as symbols of authenticity to validate their own faith and to confirm their obedience. But this is not a continuation of medieval tradition. It's a reaction. This is a reaction to colonialism, political collapse, identity crisis, and global power imbalances. This kind of literalism is not ancient. It is modern. I grew up in a Muslim majority country, and I had never seen women wearing hijabs, almost ever. Hijab wasn't Islamic, it was Arabic. A cultural evidence, not a religious requirement. I've seen more hijabs post 9/11 than I had ever seen in my life. This is a reaction, not a religious expression, but it's an attempt to belong to a group or a cult or a fraternity. They're looking for self-validation. They congregate and they recite verses that were for different times and era. Their romance with the paradise lost does not let them recognize that they're making this world hellish today. Their sense of loss does not let them move on, and the irony is that it wasn't even their loss. Their senses blur the reality and their minds distort perfectly fine images during their process of recognizing them. They feel protected within their construct of Sharia as it protects them from the sinful and evil West. And how the West looks at them. So when the West talks about Sharia law, what is it that they're referring to? Not the path, not the ethics, and not the philosophy. The West is referring to criminal punishment, state enforcement, and political systems. But historically, the development of Islamic jurisprudence or the actual legal system happened centuries after Quran was revealed. between the 8th and the 10th centuries. What you call Islamic law is not revelation. It is the interpretation. And interpretation is human. So while Sharia may be understood as divine in origin, the law is human in construction. And humans disagree. Let me also mention two simple but important caveats. First, Sharia by its own logic applies to Muslims alone and not to anyone else. This is not just a modern argument, it is rooted in the Quranic framework itself. I quoted the verses from the Quran, chapter 5, that support this. And second, when Muslims live in a secular society like Canada, like UK and the United States, they are bound by the laws of those lands. The Quran itself says, "O you who believe, fulfill your contracts." That's the first verse of chapter 5 in Quran. And citizenship, residency, visas, these are our contracts, binding ones. So where does this leave us? The Torah exists, the Quran exists. Both emerged in specific historical context. Both contain passages that reflect the norms of their times. But today, neither is applied in the way a modern criminal code is applied. And yet, only one is constantly framed as a threat. And I ask, is it fair? What people in the West call Sharia law is often a reduction, a word that has been stripped of its depth and filled with fear. But in reality, Sharia means something much simpler and much broader. It means a path towards moral accountability, towards justice, and towards social order. You may agree with it, you may disagree with it, but if the conversation is to be meaningful, it must be informed. Because in pluralistic society like ours, understanding different tradition does not weaken the democracy, it strengthens it. It allows us to separate myth from fact, law from propaganda, and faith from fear. And that kind of clarity is not optional. It is essential. Islam may be the youngest of the Abrahamic religions, but it is not young anymore. And perhaps it is time for all of us to recognize that laws evolve, societies evolve, and understanding must evolve with them. My friends, it is time to move forward. It is time to move beyond fear. It is time to move towards understanding. This is Daybreak time. Thank you.